going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning into the Mac and Fish podcast. I'm Coach McKinley Roll. I'm here with my co-host, Charles Fishbein, better known as Fish. Fish, what's going on?
Not much. Them COVID prayers came through last week. I prayed. I gave them COVID prayers. They came through. They got us through last weekend, man.
We're also here with our other co-host, Corey Long. Corey, what's up?
December 12th is not that far away. I'm just going to let y'all know. December 12th is not that far away.
Hey,
trust me. They're going to need them style points going into them final weeks of rankings, too. You should have let it happen now, is all I got to say. You should have let it happen now.
You take that thing whenever it wants to come at this point, man. You just let it ride.
Here's the best part for us as bettors. Like, FSU might beat Duke, and that line might drop to like 26.5, in which case we can all become millionaires off of that sucker.
Oh, man. That's all for fun anyway, so.
Yeah, we don't do anything for real. We don't bet for real. Entertainment purposes only.
Well, hey, let's talk about the Indiana-Ohio State game, the marquee game of the weekend. Fish, what are your thoughts on that game?
You know, before going to the game, you're like, all right, they're hyping the game so much. Here you have Indiana coming in. They're, undefeated. Everybody's pumping them up. And exactly what we thought would happen is Ohio State came out and took it to them. But the most impressive part is Indiana was able to come back. They never got down really into the game where they just couldn't come back at all. And that was the impressive part, that Tom Allen has this team believing in whatever he's selling this year. They believe in that coaching staff. We've discussed this before with believing in what the coaches are selling. But these guys are playing hard. They're not quitting. Like most teams get down by double digits, they quit. And this team didn't quit. And I thought that was super impressive with Indiana. And it all starts at that position, that quarterback position. We've talked about it so many times. Their quarterback kept them in that game. Michael Penix threw for 491 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And, this is a type of kid that I think that the Florida schools, you can't let a kid like this get out of state. You wonder why there's been so much struggling at, Miami till this year, and also Florida State, is letting guys like this continue to get out of the state that supposedly couldn't play the position, but end up pretty darn good once they get to the school. But I think Indiana showed themselves well, only losing by 7. I don't think they're going anywhere this year. I think that they'll continue to play well the rest of the way. And I think Tom Allen has probably a legitimate top 10, 15 type team this year at Indiana.
Corey?
I think, Indiana might, they might end up going to a New Year's Six Bowl, which I think is a hell of an accomplishment. They might end up, here, Outback Bowl, Citrus Bowl, one of those Florida bowls, which is always, hey, if you're living in Bloomington, Indiana, it's always nice to spend a holiday season in Florida, even in COVID situations. But, as for the game, they're down 28 on the road. Really, Ohio State hadn't even played that well. Ohio State didn't play great. They ran the ball well. They did a lot on offense. It wasn't one of their – I wouldn't say it was their A game. Justin Fields wasn't great. So, they jump up to a big lead. They're not playing well, and you just kind of think, okay, this is kind of what it is. Nice run by Indiana. But, those guys started really pushing it. They started pushing it. They started, a couple of positive things happened, and they allowed it to kind of lead to more they looked at – when I was watching the way Indiana played, I could tell that, Tom Allen kind of said, we got to get some small victories. Let's focus on having one good drive. We're down by 28 points. Let's just focus on having one good drive and see where it leads us. And one good drive turns into 2 good drives, then a defensive stop. Then you're down by 14, and all of a sudden, you had a team that was really flying high. You look at that game, and it's like, okay, another 5 minutes in that game, they probably would have found a way to win. They were just starting to warm up as the game was closing out. But Ohio State, they did enough to win. They're still on track for something. I don't know what that is exactly. I guess that's a spot in the college football playoffs. We'll find out more on Tuesday. But it was a very entertaining game. I'm happy for Michael Penix. I'm glad that he had a chance to show that, show off his skills, and happy for Tom Allen, who's a a good man, a good coach, one of those guys that you want to see have some success because he's an emotional guy, and the kids are starting to feed off of his belief in them. He believes in them, they believe in themselves. It's a nice kind of a nice way of doing psychology. I think that they believe they can do a lot more because I think he's so determined in letting them know that they can be they don't have to just be the old Indiana. They can rise up and be good.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of Indiana, that's right now you just think of it as being a basketball school, right? Having a basketball tradition. And I think this is a credit to, Coach Allen and what he's been able to do there at Indiana so far. I mean, the athletes don't match up. Ohio State has a multitude of professional athletes on their team. And it's a credit to Indiana and what Coach Allen is doing. And you could arguably say, Fish, that Penix outplayed Fields, who Fields is right now is considered a Heisman candidate. But if you look at this game, Penix outplayed him. And both teams turned the ball over a good bit. Ohio State outgained Indiana, and it really came down to that. I mean, the rush yards, they had there was a balanced attack, really. To give up 307 yards on the ground, I mean, that's what you want to do. And Ohio State is a great team, but I also think it's a credit to Indiana and what they're doing there. I love to see their future and what they're going to bring to the Big Ten fight. Now, my question to you guys, I would pose is, do you think Coach Allen would stay at Indiana? His name might be a hot, target for some of these other high-profile jobs.
I think that's the number one concern is at a school like that is when you become the hot coach, other schools are going to want you. And what's crazy is he's not that flashy guy. He's not that, but you see the emotion in him, a side of him. They showed him after the game in the locker room. I've never seen that side of Tom Allen. I've seen, and Corey's seen, a very laid back, kind of quiet guy. He's approachable as a head coach. I mean, every year I see him at the coaching convention. You could go right up to him and shake his hand. He's very approachable. He's not your typical hard ass type coach, but I think you can see that can fool you. That team's very disciplined, and you're a well-coached team when you get down by as many points as they did, and they still were able to claw back. That shows that's a lot of coaching. That team did not quit, and I definitely think Tom Allen's going to become a hot name. You win at Indiana. I think it's one of the hardest schools to win at in the Big Ten. Academically, it's very hard to get into. It's not one of these schools that they just let anybody in. And, they really we're one of the bottom feeders in that conference for so long. And not only him, I think him and Pat Fitzgerald are the two coaches that are at probably the two most difficult programs to win in the Big Ten. It's easier to win at some other schools. Purdue's shown it because they kind of have a different scheme that they've done, whether it was back with Joe Tiller or they have with Brom now. So they've changed. They're not your typical Big Ten team. But Indiana does a lot of the stuff that other teams in the Big Ten do. They don't have a great running game, but their passing game is kind of an extension of their run game. They don't throw a ton of passes downfield. They control the ball down the field, and they got a quarterback that's very accurate. But yeah, I think, Tom Allen, with the success he's having this year, the only thing is how many jobs are going to be available this year, this offseason. But I definitely think he's someone that could end up moving on and maybe even ends up an NFL coach.
There's a couple of things. Going into, I think last season, Allen was grossly underpaid. He was making less than $1 million. He signed a new contract. I think it's 7 years. I think annually it pays him about 3.9. He's from Indiana. He's from, I believe, Newcastle, Indiana, originally. So there's certain things, much like the certain things that keep Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, there's probably going to be certain things that keep Tom Allen at Indiana. And again, it just depends on what opens. I don't know that he would take another job in the Big Ten, and I think that's where a lot of the job openings are. I think he might jump. He's familiar enough with Florida, with the Southeast, and maybe he would jump at one of the higher end higher end jobs in the Southeastern Conference, or, one of the jobs at, one of the big Florida schools, if something like that opened up, if say, Dan Mullen went to the pros or something. But, I don't know. He's always going to be a hot, candidate. He's 50 years old, so he's at a right age, but I don't see him leaving Indiana anytime soon. I don't see him leaving that situation especially for another Big Ten school, even if it's a Michigan situation. I don't see him leaving Indiana. I think he's going to be happy there until a completely different challenge comes his way. That might be the NFL. Who knows?
I mean, I hope Indiana fans and administrators don't get like everybody else, that they understand that there is a ceiling at that school. You're going to have good seasons like this, but he is going to have bad seasons as well. There's going to be some 4 and 5 win seasons. It doesn't mean he's a bad coach. It's just once you lose this group of kids, you got to replace them, and they don't recruit well enough to just carry on season after season. You saw it with Grove at Wake Forest. He had a lot of good seasons, and then when those seniors left, that he was redshirted those kids, and they developed for 5 years. Those kids left, that program would slip off, and eventually the fans get spoiled. They think that Indiana fans, if they win 8-9 games this year, they're going to think, oh, this is what should happen every year. And I don't think that that's fair to coach at that type of program. And I understand there's going to be expectations, but you also have to be realistic that, their recruiting's always going to be in the middle to the lower end of that conference. It's nothing they can do. They just can't recruit to the level that Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, there's a lot of schools, Nebraska, even Iowa. There's schools in that conference that are just where they're located, and their programs are just going to recruit better. There's not a whole lot Coach Allen and that program can do. They have to take a lot of, sleeper type prospects like Penix, like some of the other kids, the Filer kid that they took that we talked about out of Tampa plant. So you're not going to always hit on those kids. And they got to be patient at that program. That this year is a great year, but don't kill him in 2 years from now when he wins 4 games and you start to hear their fans, oh, well, he lost his touch. Maybe we need to fire him. That's the problem with college football now, and we're going to talk about it with some other programs, is a lot of these programs, it's not easy to sustain it at those type of schools. And I just think that you got to be patient as a fan base that is not going to happen every year. So I don't know how you guys feel about it, but that's my take.
I would love to see. I mean, if he's going to stay at Indiana for a while, I'd love to see them expand their recruiting. They do. Tom Allen has a history here in Tampa. He was a coach at USF. He actually was a coach at Armwood High School. So they recruit Tampa okay. I'd love to see them expand down into the Tri-County to South Florida and hit those private, the academics are tougher to get into, but you hit those private schools, you hit the university schools, the St. Thomas Aquinas, the Columbuses, the Gulliver Preps, the American Heritage, and get some kids out of there. I think it's an area that they could do very well in. You guys would know a little bit more about the dynamics of South Florida recruiting than I would, but I do think it's an area it's an untapped. It's an untapped resource for them down the road, especially after a season like this.
Hey, McKinley has a few kids at his school they could offer, and they would do very well with. So they're down here and they're at good programs, and they fit the academic things. But that's the whole thing, is academically they eliminate a lot of the prospects that they can recruit in this state because of their high requirements. They don't take forgiveness classes on prospects. The kid, if he has like a D or an F in the 9th grade, that kid's not going to Indiana, So that's what hurts them, is that there may be a kid that develops late in the state that just had a bad 9th grade year, but now academically he got it together by his senior year, but they just can't take a chance on those kids. And that's what hurts them, especially in this state.
Yeah, so, right now there's a couple of jobs that may be open and coaches on the hot seat. You look at what's happening at Tennessee with Jeremy Pruitt, Texas with Tom Herman, I think is a job that you'll probably have to look, that may be open. Maybe with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, do they go in different directions? Those are all high-profile jobs that many coaches will want to coach at. I don't know what you guys think, but I know some of those coaches do have high buyouts, but in this day and age, even with COVID-19, if these schools really want to make a move on a coach, they don't ever let money get in the way.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think?
I'll go. You want to go, Fish? I can go either one.
Yeah, I just think, these schools, the problem is Tom Allen going to be sexy enough for them? I would make the hire. I mean, he's proven himself in the Big Ten with what he's doing this year at Indiana. But if Harbaugh was a big catch at Michigan. They thought they had reeled in the biggest fish and they were going to play for national titles. But now all of a sudden they've turned on him. Can you go from Jim Harbaugh to, we're hiring the coach at Indiana? Like, these guys expect Bill Belichick, I think, at Michigan. I don't think they expect Tom Allen, and that's stupid thinking. But that's what happens is you set that bar so high that you think that, it's look at Texas. You're talking about Texas. Tom Herman, everybody had to have Tom Herman. Now Texas doesn't want him, and their expectation is Urban Meyer or nothing. And what happened if Urban doesn't want to come back and coach? Yeah. Maybe he's done. He may not want to coach anymore. So they get rid of Tom Herman. Who are they bringing in there? And at some point these schools have to understand there's only so many of these great coaches to hire. You're going to have to win with somebody and hope he turns into a great coach. And that's the biggest problem you have with these schools. Their expectations are unrealistic.
Well, and every job isn't created equal, and what they're looking for isn't necessarily always created equal. Like, do I think Tom Allen would work at Michigan? Probably not. From a football standpoint, maybe. From a presentation standpoint, he's not what Michigan looks for in a coach. He's just, he's not buttoned down. He's not, he's a little bit of, he's an everyman, he's a little bit gritty. He's a little bit imperfect. And, Michigan likes, they vision themselves as sort of a button-down school, sort of a button-down proper school. They want to they're going to be looking at like the guy that I saw last night, Luke Fickell. He fits very much what they want. He fits that type, the way he presents himself, the way he talks, the way he can kind of work the room more or less. He looks like a future Michigan coach. But I can see Tom Allen at Tennessee. Absolutely. I think they love him. I think he absolutely his personality fits perfect. He fits what they need.
But again, Corey, like Fish was talking about, is he sexy enough for Tennessee?
They hired Jeremy Pruitt. Should I say anything else? They just hired Jeremy
Pruitt had Alabama and Nick Saban behind him.
But what when you look at Jeremy Pruitt, what about him says sexy hire? The guy looks like I've seen high school coaches that look more, that you'd want to put up in front of Jeremy Pruitt's just not a
Corey, me and you
I understand his job titles were very good, and that's what Tennessee fans got hooked on. Remember, they didn't want Greg Schiano because they thought that because they wanted a guy from
I'm gonna say this right now, and you can post this on the Tennessee boards. The dumbest decision those fans and those boosters made. Period. Dumb. Stupid. Yeah. They would have the program they wanted. They wanted power.
Clay Travis, another idiot.
Yeah, Clay Travis. He's an idiot. You know what? They wanted pro football, power football. They would have had it. They wanted great recruiting. They would have had it. They wanted a program builder. They would have had it. These guys basically got rid of a guy that knows what he's doing, and it's fine. Hey, listen, I think Pruitt can still win at Tennessee, but you know what? He has his issues there too. Like they're just – it's a program that we talked about. Florida State's had it. They had like 3 coaches in 2 years. The recruiting was all out of whack. You could only fix so many positions on a team at once. He hasn't figured out the quarterback position, but that's on him. But it's a program that's a mess right now, and I don't know what it's going to take to turn it around. I really don't. And they're not going to be happy. Like Indiana, if they didn't want to hire Schiano, who's coached under Belichick, coached in the NFL, was a pro coach, had success at another program at Tennessee, you really think they're going to be excited about Tom Allen? And that is stupid. It's stupid. I'm not saying it's the right.
I hear what you're saying, but I think I think one of the reasons, but beyond this, the stupid reason for the Schiano thing was they tried to connect him to the Jerry Sandell, which was absolutely ignorant and ridiculous.
He was a freaking GA at the time.
Yeah,
I mean, come
he had
on.
nothing. He had absolutely. I mean, he has as much to do with that as we did. But I think the other area where they might have looked at, was that Schiano was a little that he was. Tennessee's not a button-down job. Like Schiano's perfect for Michigan. Schiano's not perfect for Tennessee. Schiano's maybe a little too serious for Tennessee. Whereas Tom Allen, I could see, like when I watched his post-game speech last night, I could see him walking into a group of Tennessee boosters and just blending in right away. He's kind of a raw football guy. He's an emotional guy. He's going to get guys. He's going to get people riled up. He's going to get them excited. We both know Greg Schiano. Greg ain't the type. Greg is not a hype machine. You know what I'm saying? Like Greg ain't gonna hype. He's gonna let you know what it is, real. He's gonna let you know what the real deal is. And when I said they hired Jeremy Pruitt, I didn't know a lot about Pruitt. I knew he was a dynamic recruiter, did a great job at FSU, Georgia, Alabama. But when I saw him, I looked at him. I'm like, this guy's not the head coach that they need. Like he just didn't look like the type of guy that could kind of, when you take those jobs, you got to be able to work your environment. You got to be able to work that room. You got to give those people the comfort and confidence to know that he's the guy. I've never seen that out of Jeremy Pruitt there. I never got the impression that him and that fan base were going to jive.
Yeah, but he's an elite level recruiter, and that's huge when a coach is getting hired. He's an elite level recruiter. Yeah. So those guys wanted an elite level recruiter. He came from Alabama in the Saban tree. So how do you beat Saban? You take one of his guys. And that's what they sold themselves on. Listen, we've talked about it off the record. How many times, like what these schools actually look for, I don't think half of them know what they're looking for. They hear a name and that's the buzz and that's it. They don't do any research. They hire some BS firm for $250,000. Hey, schools, call me. I guarantee you I can help you find a better coach and assistant coaches than some place that you pay $250,000 and they give you a name that everybody else knows. All right. I mean, come on. It's a joke, but what can you do? These schools still haven't learned from their mistakes and they continue to make them over and over.
Yeah. Did McKinley fall asleep?
I think McKinley went out. I think McKinley's took a dive, man. So
McKinley might have fallen asleep. We'll have to continue this one without him.
So, well, you know what we'll do? We're gonna carry this conversation on. We don't need McKinley.
We can without him.
We'll go to the UF game. They played Vanderbilt this week. I don't know what happened, Corey, but these guys got off to a major slow start. I think UF had 7 points at halftime or 10. What do you think happened this week?
I think it was their first road trip since the Texas A&M game. I think it's their last. Well, it might be their second to last road trip in general. So I just think they were just, you haven't been on the road in 2 months. I think they were a little, maybe just took them a while to get warmed up. It was a noon game, an opponent that is hard to get hyped up for. Vanderbilt's headed to probably a winless season. And Vandy, to their credit, came out, played them tough, brought out a freshman quarterback who threw for, I think, over 300 yards. Eventually what happened was going to happen. It wasn't an impressive victory. They're not going to get any style points. I don't think that they leave Nashville happy with their performances. But, when you don't have it together, they've got a couple, they've got some opponents coming up that just are going to be tougher to get up for, until they get to Alabama. So at this point, they're going to have to, they just have to kind of grind their way through it. And this was a victory. They kind of grinded their way through. I think that come Tuesday when the rankings are released, that's when we're going to see that, they probably took a little bit of a hit for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think they got to realize too, though, that they can't play like this the rest of the year. Like every opponent is going to come and play, and like they can't. They have no room for error. They got a very good football team, but they're one slip up away. That even if they get to the conference championship, really, what are they going to play for if they have 2 losses going into it?
Yeah.
But I agree, man. They just had a really. It was an ugly win, and I guess you take all the wins you could get. But moving on, one of the next topics we wanted to go into is the playoffs and just some of the teams here. We know coming out when the rankings come out, Alabama is going to be ranked number 1.
Yeah.
Probably Notre Dame number 2, Ohio State number 3, and Clemson 4. Who outside of that group, in your opinion, Corey and McKinley, do you feel could break into that top 4?
Well, I look at 2 teams that, to me, look to be playing the best football right around now. Is Texas A&M and Florida. I know that you have 2 SEC teams, but obviously, what past years have shown us is that the playoff committee is going to put the 4 best teams that they feel are out there. And right now, it's hard to argue that Florida is not playing as one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country right now. And there goes Texas A&M. They're led by a former coach that probably should be at FSU to this day. But I won't get into that too much. He's doing a great job at A&M. They're playing great football. I just do not think Cincinnati should be, even though they're playing, it's great. It's a great story. Cincinnati and BYU, excellent, but they're not on that level that we see with those upper teams. They're not playing that level of competition, and I don't think they have the caliber player. But that's my opinion. I don't know about you, Corey.
A&M's got to get back on the field. They haven't played in a few weeks now. They keep getting games canceled. They're just not going to have enough inventory to get in, unfortunately. And I think we know that, Florida's got to win out to get in. They lose to Bama unless it's a really close loss with some controversy and some other things happen. They're probably going to get shut out. So beyond that, I look at, can Oregon slip in? I don't think so. I don't think the 6 or 7 games of Pac-12 scheduling is going to work in their favor. I know USC's undefeated. And they actually, I thought, played all right last night on the road against Utah. I don't see that happening, though. You have Ohio State. You have Bama. I actually think I think Clemson's going to beat Notre Dame. I think Ohio State's going to win. I think Alabama's going to win out. I think that's your 4. I think that's what's going to end up happening. It's going to be a weird year for the ACC to get 2 teams in, but hey, that's why you asked Notre Dame to be in your conference, is because you might catch them on a hot year and get them. I don't see anybody else in the Big Ten. Once Wisconsin lost to Northwestern, that kind of eliminated the chances of that second Big Ten team jumping in there. So if there was ever a year for a Cincinnati or a BYU or for the playoffs to even do a temporary expansion, this would be the year. I covered Cincinnati last night when they played UCF, and they're capable. They're certainly a capable team. They've won most of their games in a dominating fashion. UCF was going to be their toughest game, at a place that's hard to win against a team that's hard to win. And, at times they were a little sluggish, but there were periods in that game where you really saw, what their ceiling is. And Fish and I love BYU. I think BYU made a big mistake by not switching out that North Alabama game they played yesterday with something else. There were some the thing is, in this season, you can switch around your schedule a lot. You can book a game a week in advance.
BYU's been trying to get the Pac-10 schools. I just think the Pac-10 schools have seen them play, and they're like, nah.
Well, they weren't. Up until last week, they weren't doing non-conference games, but because so many Pac-12 schools are getting COVID, that they are allowing some non-conference games as long as they're played at the Pac-10 site. So I think BYU should have jumped on Colorado. I think that would have been a game that they would have taken. I don't know that would have gotten them. It would have been a better look than North Alabama. It's not their fault. I get it. This is the type of year where you can play whoever you want to play. But I think they had to figure – you know what I would like to see? And it's not going to happen because A&M's so far behind. I would love to see BYU and A&M. If A&M gets healthy and they can't get an opponent, I'd love to see that game. I think it would work out for both schools.
No doubt. I just, I look at the teams in the playoffs and I still think Notre Dame's going to win out. I I personally think Notre Dame's going to go and play Clemson and beat them in the ACC title game. And if that happens, you got Alabama's only team that's really distinguished themselves this year. And I think Notre Dame's done a very good job. What I've seen from Ohio State, they got a good team, but it's flawed. It's not the Ohio State. Ohio State looks more like Florida State their second year in the playoffs, where they struggled in games and they lost to Oregon at the end. That looks more of the Ohio State team this year. They're very talented, but they're beatable. Clemson has shown that they're susceptible this year in the Boston College game. They've had some moments where they've struggled this year. I think that they're beatable again against Notre Dame. And if it happens, I think Notre Dame and Alabama are definitely in. Who would be in if Clemson did lose to Notre Dame again? Then A&M would come into the picture, and maybe one of those Cincinnati or BYU. I'm a big fan of BYU. I think they would beat Cincinnati. I just think they're a more balanced team offensively, and they're very good defensively. I just think they're one of the better teams I've seen play this year. Outside of Alabama, Notre Dame, and Ohio State and Clemson, I think they could beat anybody in the top 10. I really believe that. I don't know if they could beat the four teams that are in the top four now, but BYU is really, really good. I just think most of the country have not seen them play.
I think BYU's excellent. BYU's excellent.
No, they're a good team. They're a good team, no doubt.
All the teams are flawed, really. I mean, they're just not. It's such a weird year that I can't look at a team and say that they're not flawed. We're going to have flawed teams in the playoffs this year. However we look at it, it's just the way it is. I felt like especially about midway through the season when COVID really started to change the schedule, the playoffs should have expanded to 8 and possibly, I was thinking when I saw that 15 games canceled last week, 15 this past week, and I said, why don't the playoffs just pick 8 teams right now and tell them they can't play past this weekend? Let's start this thing on December 19th.
Put them in a bubble.
Yeah, exactly. So you can are we really positive that we're actually going to get a championship game? I don't know if we are.
I think they'll find a way. Money's too bad.
Yeah, they'll play.
There's too much money. I mean, look, they're getting through a high school game. Like Goldman this weekend is playing on Monday to get an extra game in. Come on. If high schools are finding ways to play, the colleges and pro,
high schools aren't testing, Charles. I mean,
Goldman's testing. Trust me.
Clemson's not testing.
Coral Parks.
Players positive.
Coral Parks missed 3 games because of other teams. All right, trust me. I mean, heck, Ronald Reagan doesn't have an athletic trainer right now, so they can't play any games.
Man.
But it's another great podcast, and I enjoyed talking to you guys. Hopefully, you guys have a great Thanksgiving, and we get to watch some real good football this week.
Absolutely, guys.
So, I will check out, man. I'll check with you guys later.
Take care, Fish.
All right. Bye.